by phone, right, Ailey?
Yes.
Okay, great. Courtney, do you want to kick us off here?
Yeah, we're going to start with a presentation about SUN, so Schools Uniting Neighborhoods. Do we know who's sharing slides? Yeah. Then Ross just getting his slides up and running, and then we'll get going.
I'm pretty new to, well, a little familiar with Zoom, so give me just a minute.
Yes. Great. And I guess I'll just set a little bit of the context for why we're spending this time diving into our SUN programming, because we're about to begin sort of a new round of RFP and contracting process with our SUN partners. So we really want to think deeply across our organization about how we're serving our kids in partnership with SUN, where we're serving them, what we're serving them, and think about how and where we might want to do things differently in the future. And why it's such an important partnership.
Absolutely. And if I may, Chair Jonathan Garcia, Chief of Staff, I think in light of yesterday's conversation at the board meeting, I think this is a timely conversation as we, continue to build and strengthen our relationship with the county to provide after-school services to our families. So just wanted to note that for the record.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation and having deep conversations as part of this process of rethinking how we're going to approach just this, how we might do things differently.
Well, thanks so much for the nice setup, Chair Consam. My name is Danny Ledesma. I'm the RESJ advisor for PPS, and I'm joined by my colleague, Menroth Nye, who is our RESJ SUN program manager. Menroth's been with the district for over a year now by way of a partnership organization, and he has a lot of deep skill and experience in working with partners and school districts. So I'm really happy I get to work with Menroth every day, and happy that you'll get to hear a little bit more from Menroth. I think what we want to do today before we jump into the sort of opportunity of SUN funding is just give an opportunity to do some review about what is a SUN community school, what is our SUN system, what does it look like at PPS, and to Jonathan's point about our relationship with the county, how do we sort of see the current alignment and where can we strengthen that alignment? So we'll talk about that SUN funding process. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Menroth, and he's going to give us just a little bit of an overview.
Hi, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep.
Cool. Thanks everybody for giving me this opportunity to be here and speak a little bit about SUN. And so we're going to start off with its kind of basis of what it's trying to do. And so the basis of what SUN is, it's based on the idea of community schools. And if you're not familiar with community schools, we're going to go over that a little bit. But right now, if you look at the map on the slideshow, you'll see that community schools isn't just a thing in Portland, Oregon, and through Multnomah County is actually national. Nationwide, there's about 5,000 community schools in the nation right now. And so we'll break down what that exactly means. And so community school is it's really a school where the community partners come from across a broader community to come together and educate, support, and create a collective impact. This is where community resources are strategically organized to support student success. And there's a focus on the whole child, integrating academic services, supports, and opportunities. And so an ideal community school will have these 5 tenets here in place. And so that means a strong instructional core. Not only does it, because a lot of people think that SUN is just an extended day, but it's also an extension of the in-school day. And so that is in alignment with the in-school instructional core. Expanded learning opportunities for youth and families. Again, what they do in the extended days, but also offering services and programming for families and not just the students. Authentic and culturally responsive path for family engagement. And so it's very strategic and deliberate that a lot of our Sun agencies are coaching-based organizations, a la SEI, a Latino Network, ERCO. The and the reason being is because they want to reflect the community they serve and be in tune with the needs and the demands of the community, being able to engage with that with those students and families. Another one would be wraparound services, integrating services including social health and mental health resources. So it's not just academic and enrichment based, but also including everything that student families may need for to be successful in the community. And lastly, shared leadership with families and the community. And so really the success of a community school is not just based in programming, but the shared ownership with all stakeholders within that programming. Next slide.
So I think one of the things that we know, and for folks in our community, Sun Service System in Multnomah County just had its 20th anniversary during the COVID year, so we didn't get to have a huge celebration. But in that sort of partnership, we've been trying to realize that big vision of what a true community school can look like. And so we partner with Multnomah County and the City of Portland to support a service system, which is why we want to make sure that we're trying to demystify the partnerships. It is rather large, and so we wanted to just take this time to talk a little bit more about what it looks like here in Multnomah County.
And so when people think about Sun, they automatically know them for the extended day and after school programming. And part of the demysticism that we want to do here is paint a clear picture of what Sun really is and what they really offer. And so not only do they do, culturally affirming and well extended day programming, but they provide a system of care that supports the social support and services to youth and families that lead to educational success and sufficiency and self-sufficiency. And so in our next slide, you can kind of see all the things, not just extended day, that they offer. And so Sun Community Schools, which we just talked about, which offers that extended day programming, service brokering access, service coordination for families and students, parent coordination, access to information referrals, and then of course that extended day. But they also have Sun Youth Advocates, and those are sort of like case match social workers in the Sun program. They have a caseload of kids that they check in on and make sure that they get all the services and support that they need. And then they have family resource navigators, which this is a relatively new position. During the pandemic, they noticed that a lot of their services kind of geared towards resource coordination and allocation. And so out of that need, they created a new role that specifically dealt with this resource and allocation and coordination. So in the role of a family resource navigator, they work with families, they identify resources and coordinate those resources with them. Resources such as food, basic supply needs, domestic supplies, rent, utility assistance, educational support, and provide also family engagement. And then lastly, food pantry services. And so they do offer, in partnership with the Oregon Food Bank, weekly food distribution sites where any family in the community could come and get these free services. They currently operate at 20, but now that we're rolling back out of the pandemic, they're transitioning back to about 29 sites that will routinely happen weekly and or monthly at those sites.
So now that you see sort of like what the larger system is, we want to talk a little bit about what Sun looks like at PPS. And so we want to kind of pull back up to the sort of like 10,000 foot level and talk about our strategic plan. So Menroth, together with our partners at the county and our service providers, have sort of done a review of when we look at our major themes in our strategic plan, sort of like where that alignment happens. So when we talk about racial equity and social justice under theme 1, that reimagining relationships and a sense of belonging, the work that our Sun partners are doing at the school site level and with families is really sort of reinforcing that, making sure that there's equitable access to facilities and resources are another place where our Sun partners are establishing not just a place, but a sense of belonging across the district for families that may not be as comfortable with big institutions, but a way for them to sort of enter into our school system with a positive sort of like relationship. Theme 2, inclusive and differentiated learning for every child. The idea of implementing our multi-tiered systems of support, because of the relationship with Multnomah County Services and because of the system of care that SUN does, this is really important that we are aligned in the way that we think about what are those tiered supports, those differentiated supports that every student has access to. The other thing, when we talk about embracing change and strategic outcomes, building a collective sense of trust and belonging and cultivating and promoting aligned community partnerships, it goes back to that vision of what a community school is, about that sort of shared leadership and shared planning, where between the county, the city of Portland, PPS, our school sites, our families, our students, we want to make sure that we have a strong SUN system that is working together for families and students. We go to the next slide. As you all know, we've done a lot of work around our partnerships with culturally specific organizations and our RESJ partnership strategies. So when we talk about our theory of action that blends the strongest instructional core, that braids the strong instructional core with our RESJ strategies, we're talking about these 5 strategies: culturally specific family engagement, wraparound services, mentoring and leadership development, enrichment and extended learning, and positive cultural identity development. So while many of our partners do overlap with our 5 SUN partners, we do have a lot of overlapping in terms of the strategies that SUN is implementing at their 45 different schools throughout the district, along with our RESJ partners. And then finally, we wanted to make sure that we're talking about the alignment with the strong instructional core. So as you know, PPS has been really focused on implementation of our instructional framework. And when we talk about educational equity, the instructional framework, and how SUN fits in, we really sort of think about how can we make sure that professional learning, that what's offered in extended learning is reinforcing the work of our instructional framework, that we're aligning to grade level standards, that we're data driven, but also we're utilizing our SUN partners because of their expertise in culturally affirming services. We also want to make sure that with our SUN community schools, that the model is promoting that alignment and integration of academics with services and supports so that our students are helping to meet our mission. So let's talk about SUN by the numbers. So at PPS, we have 5 partner agencies. So Menroth mentioned a few of them. So we partner with SEI, with Latino Network, with IRCO, Impact Northwest, and the City of Portland through Parks and Recreation. So those are our 5 partner agencies. And when we talk about that funding opportunity, that is something that could potentially be changed. Right now, we've, in partnership with this county and with the city, have identified 45 schools. And each year, SUN serves over 9,000 students. If we click on that link there, if we click on the link there, I wanted to make sure that you all saw this. This is a partner by school where we have all of our different services. So if you go to the SUN Services tab, this is where you can see by each school. So say, for example, if we looked at our LEADA, where we have the SUN agency lead, which is Parks and Rec, and then you can see if youth advocacy is there, who that staff is, who the SUN resource navigator is, and then also, keep on scrolling to the left, then also if there's a food pantry. And so that is available to board members to take a look. We also have our child care providers and our RESJ providers. So you have the keys to the castle there. So we wanted to give you this overview to tell you how SUN is currently aligned at PPS, because as Director Constam sort of relate to everyone, Sun typically has been doing a sort of request for proposals where they sort of like re-release a funding notification and go through the formal procurement system of the county related to Sun. This has not happened for over 5 years because of the pandemic. And so we do have a set of asks out to the county, and we wanted to make sure that this committee, along with our board of directors, had an opportunity to weigh in. So if you look at this timeline, there's 3 slides that basically tell us kind of where we are. And so right now, Sun is starting to close out their stakeholder feedback and analysis. And on the 31st, the Sun Coordinating Committee will be sort of reviewing all of that stakeholder feedback analysis. We have also done sort of interviews with principals, interviews with Sun providers, and with staff, and we'll be sort of making sure that that's all part of this this feedback. At the same time, the county, just like us, is very data oriented. They'll be looking at community demographics to look at sort of where need might be moving, and then they'll start to develop a series of system program model updates. And I think that that is really a key time between November and December where we'll really want to continue to lean on our partners at Multnomah County and the city to make sure that our sort of needs and opportunities where we see alignment are really sort of met in this opportunity to update the model. There's also going to be, the county's going to be looking at cost and allocation, just like we do when we look at our budget. So if we go to the next slide, a couple of other dates to look at is that
Danny?
Oh, sure.
Sorry, can I interrupt you for just 1 second? So I don't know exactly what their stakeholder feedback and analysis entails, but will we be doing any community engagement relative to that last step that you talked about, that it'll be so important for us to make sure that you know, we're providing input on what our needs are?
Yeah, so Menroth worked with a consultant to do that process, and so we have some of the feedback from there. Their stakeholder feedback is really similar to ours. So they talk to students, families, principals, service providers, as well as to superintendents. So the superintendent has talked, directly with the chair, as well as informed us, as well as Menroth, his counterparts at other districts, and in all of the other Multnomah County districts. The other thing that they've done and that we've also done is talk to folks who aren't served by the Sun system to try to understand why. And so I think that's a key piece there. So I think in terms of their methodology and our methodology, it's really similar. And I think we'll probably have much more district-specific recommendations, but I don't imagine that other districts don't have similar asks. And so in 2 more slides, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the emerging themes. But you'll notice that between now and February, those Sun system model updates will be made. At the same time, the county will experience a change in leadership. So Chair Kafori has been a good shepherd of this process, but a new chair will ultimately have to make this decision. So we'd love to kind of work with Courtney and the board to think about how we're really working in partnership to make sure that this partnership is sort of working for everyone.
Early and often. Early and often,
yes. So there's some advocacy and some asks that we have of the system that are sort of starting to bubble up. So you'll notice that in March, the system will sort of get those feedbacks to those model updates. They'll try to update in June, and then going down to the next slide, starting in the school year, starting in September 2023, the procurement will be released. And so one thing that you'll notice is that for our RSJ partnerships, we did a redesign and promised to do an RFP after 4 years, which puts our procurement process along the same timeline as the Sun procurement process. So we're in the process right now of trying to do some planning, just to think about how the impact will be on some of our service providers and having to, this is a huge, I've been on the rating panel for all of the time that I've lived here in PPS and Portland, and it is a huge solicitation. It's a big amount of lift for providers to sort of do this. So you'll notice that they will then sort of use the time between April to July to support transitions. So it is very likely, it could be likely that the county could increase or change or add or take away from some of the current providers. So right now in PPS, there are 5 service providers. And so we'll have to work very closely with the county if there are some of those changes and transitions. With the exception of Impact Northwest and the city, SEI, Latino Network, and IRCO are major partners of us on the RESJ partnership side. So we would want to sort of understand what that looks like. So in the next slide, so going back to what Director Constam talked about is, so what are some of the feedback that's coming out? And so I've kind of put it into two buckets.
Hey, Danny,
sure.
can I interrupt you for a second? I think there's somebody who doesn't have their computer on mute. Ailey, maybe are you in transition? Maybe it's you, not sure, but I'm getting a lot of background noise. Sorry.
No, I'm in the room, Amy. I think we've got a group of folks talking in the cafeteria lobby, and I think that's what you're picking up.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay.
Is that you asking me to talk louder? Just joking. So I put our sort of asks into 2 categories. One is about alignment and one is about investment. So one of the things that we've noticed and that we've talked about is that over time, the schedule of Sun services has really moved away from the district schedule. And this is, I would say, a top priority for the superintendent.
Like it starts in October, is that when you're
That's
talking
right.
about?
So typically our Sun providers start after school. They're on site, but not providing direct services after school to students until typically a month, sometimes a month and 6 weeks after the start of the school year. We've heard from principals, we've heard from parents, and from the superintendent and from a lot of district staff about just that doesn't really work for families. And so there's a lot of reasons why, historical and that have to do with funding, that partners have talked about. So we continue to sort of say, like, we would love to see with this redesign more alignment to the school schedule, which also I'm going to skip over professional learning and talk about kindergarten services. So Sun After School historically hasn't served kindergartners, which is unfortunate, as the city is the lead agency for Preschool for All. And it was because this was all determined pre-full day kindergarten, right? So I think now just the reality of working families and the reality of sort of time that we want with students, I think that we do need to kind of revisit with the county and with our service providers about serving kindergartners. The other piece is that, as you all know, with Dana Nierenberg and under Dr. Proctor's leadership, we have done a lot of alignment with Sun and the Learning Academy, the Summer Learning Academy. And it has been, as part of our contract with Sun, we do ask them to provide 4 weeks of services, but we really want to make sure that it's aligned to the SLA. We so believe in the value of extended learning and enrichment paired with the intensive academics. It really just makes, especially for our younger students, the work sing. And so we want to create some better aligned expectations of that. The other thing is that just like our district, we want to make sure that we're helping to build and really build the capacity of our service partners and the staff there. And so we want to make sure that we're thinking about professional learning and opportunities for some of our Sun partners. We want to make sure that in terms of everything from restorative justice to social emotional learning to understanding grade level expectations and why that's important, our commitment to racial equity and social justice, we want to make sure that those Sun staff are getting opportunities to really sort of align and learn just as we are as a district. So that's the aligned
Danny,
budget. Yes.
Can you, sorry, I'm kind of herky jerky here with the interjections. Can you help me understand what the process is for these conversations about sort of changing tweaking the nature of our relationship?
Yeah,
And
so
the
if we go back
programming?
to that timeline document, as they're sort of updating the model, you know, as staff and, you know, from the superintendent to, you know, to folks on my team, we are advocating pretty aggressively aggressively to sort of like make that sort of district known. And the superintendent has also kind of worked with his colleagues, his other superintendents in the county, and we're seeing a lot of alignment.
Okay.
I think that as elected officials, though, and the incoming chair, because there will be a transition, I do think that my recommendation is I do think there's an opportunity for the board to also think about some places to advocate, not just in, you know, to the coordinating council and with our providers, but directly with the chair's office and with Multnomah County. So I think that horizon between, you know, that November to February when they're doing their first model updates, I think will be really key. I also believe that between March and May, you know, once we receive kind of like what those model updates are, providing, you know, really specific feedback about how that or does or does not meet our priorities is going to be also important. So I think it's continuing to, well, I think my suggestion would be to love to hear the board's feedback, sort of, you know, see if there's anything that we can do to kind of provide more information about these asks, see if there's places where we've missed, if there's board member interest in something that's not on here. And then, you know, kind of create some opportunities for some conversations with the folks at the county to start, you know, influencing those model updates. So I think
this is exactly why we have this committee here right now. This is a perfect example. And so, speaking for myself, I will definitely, you know, work with my colleagues to advocate for the changes that our service providers and our families and our leaders in our schools are looking for and are asking for. And also, frankly, these are just some gaps that we know have existed for a long time. So I think you can count on the board advocating for those changes. And then the piece that I would be interested in is, you know, how and in what way and at what time would it be helpful to educate and mobilize our community around these things?
So I think, I do think there is some nuance to understanding, like, you know, I put the alignment pieces in like the alignment bucket, but they do have a fiscal impact, right? So I think this year we tried to work really closely with our partners as well as the county in talking about summer and in talking about schedule and professional learning. And the county was also sort of getting hit by getting hit with a lot of requests for increases in funding. And so I think sort of aligning to our budget, understanding our budget, the impacts of our asks on the county budget. And also, I think one of the things I don't want to sort of, I don't want to glaze over the investments to support services. I think that as a public service nerd and someone who thinks deeply about our social network and our safety net system in Multnomah County and the city of Portland, I think it's really important that we be aligned with the county and not my recommendation is that we don't recreate service systems within PPS, because what happens is that that takes away from the actual services. So, one of the things that we, Menra talked about the resource navigators, and that was, I really thought, a missed opportunity for collaboration, because while we were hearing that navigating the system was difficult, PPS also invested really heavily in social workers who are trained to navigate the system. So we basically had 2 sets of navigators, and what the navigators were finding is that the services weren't available to be able to provide those families, right? So it's one thing to be able to navigate, but it's another thing not to be able to resource those services. So when we think about like the investment to support services, I think we do also need to make sure that we're talking about increasing the number of, what is the plan to increase the number of mental health and behavioral health providers so that we can refer to them. What is the county, how is the county thinking about the allocation of safety net services to serve families? So we hear a lot about sort of like needs for rent assistance and for, families just to be able to, who hit one emergency. And so we really need to think about, sort of how can we encourage the county to invest deeply in those safety net services so that our students' needs are being met. And then I think service coordination is the big piece, right? Like we want to make sure that we're not inadvertently recreating systems that the county has. And so I think that's why we wanted to spend this time talking about it's not just Sun after school, but it really is a system of services. And how do we make sure that we're getting as many services and not creating lines of people in between the students and services. So
Danny, this is a really important point to me, because when Sun was created, we had very few of those services within our school buildings and within our school days. And now we have quite a bit, and we hope that we can, continue to fund those in the coming years. So we need to work much smarter about how to coordinate that with the resources coming through our partners. I think I'm really intrigued and interested by that challenge.
Oh.
Yeah, and I think sorry,
go ahead.
So I think a good example of service coordination is as new Title 10 schools come online, what's the plan to provide services for those? So we had a school that came online as a new title school, but Sun is not there. And when we talked with the county, they were not sure that school would qualify under their sort of like methodology for citing Sun schools. And we were kind of like, what? We need alignment and service coordination there. To be a title school is a pretty significant threshold. And so that service coordination and alignment is really, really important. So I think the county will welcome the conversations about alignment, and I think the question is how do we sort of map out the resources to support that alignment, and I think that having a board of directors who are so committed to our our system and our partners is going to be really helpful.
I know that like the vast majority of our students are Multnomah County, but we do have some that are Clackamas and Washington. Like, what is our relationship like with those counties? And does the fact that we are in reality a multi-county district, does that ever, impact our relationship with Multnomah County?
I don't think we have any Sun programming though in those slices, do we, Danny?
No, I think where the tension actually rests is the perception that PPS may not be the seat of where poverty or where all the needs are. And because of the demographic shifts moving east, and because of the way that the state school fund works and other districts are funded, I think there can be some tension there. But the superintendent has done a really elegant job in working with his colleagues, the sister superintendents within the county, and meets regularly with the chair, and I imagine he'll continue that with the other chair, to sort of find like where are we finding those things in common. Clackamas County is a really different county than Multnomah County. And so they don't have the same level of sort of school-based relationships that we do. So we're really fortunate to have the Sun system.
So
It's an exemplar across the country.
It's amazing.
if I may, I just want to be consider time. We have 4 agenda items, so we really want to get maybe to a little bit of an action step here that I heard. I want to channel or lift up what you shared, Chair Constam, which is what can you the board, this committee do. I think as an immediate next step, we'll have Courtney Westling, our Director of Government Relations, coordinate some meetings, if you will, with some of our county elected officials. We'll provide you the material and the support to have a meaningful dialogue there if it's helpful. And just to add to the context of this, when we were going around having conversations with electeds ahead of the budget process this spring, this conversation came up with who are with 2 of the county commissioners who are now vying for the chairmanship, and so they are aware of the need of our asks, and so I think following that up from elected to an elected, I think would be a good next step. So if it makes sense with you, Chair, Courtney can coordinate some meetings and some next steps there.
Yeah, it's on my list. It's been on my list.
Yep, that sounds good. Thank you, Jonathan, for just doing my job and moving the agenda along. But yeah, that sounds good. And I've had some of those offline conversations as well. And I would say there is a recognition in the within the county leadership at this time that we need to make some shifts. All right, Danny, was there anything else for this presentation?
No, thank you so much. And Menroth and I are here to support Lydia as well. So if you need anything, let us know.
Yeah, this is, Jonathan, I appreciated your saying this is really, last night's board conversation was kind of a microcosm of just how important this relationship is to our students and families. And I think in most places we've got it right, but we do recognize that we have some gaps, both geographic and in services. So we have a great opportunity to just make improvements this time around. So thank you, Danny. That was really informative. And Courtney, I will send it back to you.
Yeah, so thank you guys for being here, and I feel like I always learn a little something, even though we've been talking about Sun for a long time. So thank you for the great presentation. And yeah, we will definitely be talking to whoever wins on November 8th and getting those set up and letting them settle in a little bit. But there's definitely going to be a shift at the chairs level, so we know there will be someone new with new staff. So it's a good opportunity, honestly, to reintroduce this and our commitment to it, and then double down on all these asks. So next on the agenda, we're going to talk about our legislative agenda. It's a draft at this point, and we want to kind of walk through sort of why we have certain things on it, and just open it up mostly for an informal discussion on what you what you as a board want it to communicate to our elected officials in Salem, and what high-level priorities you want to double down on paper, right? Because this will be a public document that you approve in December. Amy and I talked about that this morning. There's really no rush to getting this done by November, especially with the election, and that may drive some changes to the document. So I'm going to kick it over to Lisa Merrick from the team to kind of walk through a few slides and just highlight some of the specific topic areas that we want to focus on here.
And Courtney, if I may, can I? Yeah. If I just want to add a little bit more context and just small, I think what's important here to contextualize is that this is talking about our engagement and our relationship at the state level. As we just talked about in the previous conversation, we have local relationships that we want to, and local strategies that we want to also engage in. So, but
That's-
today's conversation
Yeah,
is
that's a good
solely
point. Sorry, when we say legislative agenda, we often think of Salem. So I will jump out of my kind of bubble and just clarify that this next discussion is really specific to our state legislative priorities. We realize that our document that is a draft at this point does include some local stuff, so we're gonna pull that off. Well, we originally were thinking big, like, let's have one big thing with all the things on it, just to keep it simple, and we realized it's not actually simpler. So there will be some updates there, but Lisa, go ahead.
Before I jump into the priorities themselves, I wanted to touch on a few key dates that are coming up. So November 16th, there's going to be a revenue forecast. These are this is one of quarterly presentations by the state economists on our state's projected revenue collection. It's important to watch this, which Courtney and I will do, and report back. It's really helpful to know where the state is projecting revenues to be, and this is like key data they'll use in making state policy and budget decisions during the session. And then December 7th through 9th are legislative committee days. This is when the policy and budget committees meet to hear informational presentations on important issues, potential bills that will be coming through the session, and then updates on bill implementation that's happening now.
Yeah, and I would say, just to jump in on that, December legislative days before the long session are always really interesting because that is when things are a little closer to being more than just conceptual. When they have hearings and briefings, they're closer to being actual concepts. So it's a lot different than September or even last May when it's just a lot of big high level ideas. Now we're getting down to the details. So it's interesting. We'll be paying close attention to that.
And there's opportunities during legislative days to advocate as well, not just paying
Yeah.
attention, but to
Yeah.
participate.
We may, and we're trying to get our heads around. We haven't seen any schedules yet. It's pretty early still, but the conversations among chairmen and women about what kinds of topics they're going to dig into will be coming soon. So we'll know a little bit more about where it makes sense for us to advocate. And then one other thing really quick, normally in the session in the December, we usually see a governor's budget come out in December before the long session. We will not have that this year. We have an election. So the governor's budget will be coming out in February because this is an election year and it just things look a little different than last time. So normally we would have a little bit of a blueprint going into session. We won't have that this time. So depending on who wins on November 8th, that person will work with the Legislative Fiscal Office and others to develop their budget that gets used as the starting point for the budget discussion. It's just a little later when it's a new governor. So I didn't want to miss that because that's a big piece, because obviously one of the big things on our agenda every time is money, 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 money.
Yes. And then the next date is December 21st, which is the pre-session bill filing deadline. So earlier in September, late September, legislators had the opportunity to request a bill from Legislative Council. So the attorneys at the legislature are working on writing bills they've requested. They'll start beginning to send those back to legislators, and then by December 21st, they have to file those bills with the chief clerk's office at the legislature. So we'll begin to see bills in the legislative informational system starting in late December and early January. There's also another set of deadlines later in the session, I think January to March, where legislators can ask for bills to be written again. So we'll be watching those and we'll report back what those dates are as well. And then January 17th is when the Oregon legislature session begins. It's the constitutional end date is supposed to be June 25th, though it might end slightly earlier depending on if they're able to get through their workload.
Or slightly later, like a few years back when they went over and over and over. So we don't like that. We hope that doesn't happen. They can usually get their work done in time, but it's not unheard of to go late into the summer.
So traditionally, ahead of the Oregon State legislative session, the Portland Public School Board approves the district's legislative priorities or state priorities. This year, we're aiming to get the board to approve the agenda by early to mid-December. Our team has put together a draft framework based on a lot of input from several stakeholders in the district across different topic areas. And as a disclaimer, this document is not intended to be a full or exclusionary list of bills, especially since we're still finding out about bills that are being filed, and bills can still be filed during the session. So these are categories we've put together that are grounded in the board's goals that are meant to really be a filter through which we will determine what legislation we support, we advocate for, or oppose during the 2023 session.
And one other quick note on that, we are sometimes really enthusiastically supportive of something, really like anti, we don't like this isn't good for kids. And then we're neutral sometimes, where we're just kind of like, yeah, that's okay. We feel like that would be fine, but we're not going to waste a lot of staff time or resources on it because it may be not that directly connected to our work. Mm-hmm. So I just mentioned that because we often get asked, can you take a position on this? Can you take a position on that? And it's not always worth taking a strong position where we're writing testimony or, there's only so many hours in the day, things move really fast. We sometimes have to pick and choose where our resources and time are best served.
So with that, I will go ahead and talk about the framework itself. We sort of have put together this overarching narrative, just wanting the legislature to really meet this moment that we're in, knowing that the COVID-19 crisis has just exacerbated educational inequalities for all students, especially our Black and Native students, students of color, students from low-income homes, students with disabilities, English language learners, students experiencing homelessness, students in the foster care system, undocumented students. This is one of the most critical points at which our state has to invest in education and sustain the funding that we've gotten in the last 2 years. Students have more mental health needs right now. We have just a lot more needs that students and families have at this time. And beyond that, it's also the board's and the district's goals to eliminate unacceptable gaps in third grade reading, eighth grade readiness, first grade math, and high school graduation. So that's how we've.
Courtney, back to your point about when we take an official stance on something and invest our resources of time and energy. As far as the board weighing in, Ailey, I think that our board goals should be the litmus test for that.
Yep. Yeah, and thank you. That's really helpful. And I think, so much happens so fast once things get rolling in the session. And where we get tripped up sometimes is we need to know, okay, this just falls in line with our priorities and our outline. We're just going to do it. We can't always wait to be told yes. And so we want kind of the permission to be able to do that based on where, these categories. Yeah. And then there are going to be the times where we're like, Amy, Ailey, Gary, I need you to go talk to so-and-so because this is like at risk of not happening, or the number they're attaching to it isn't adequate, or whatever the issue may be. There's a million of them. We want to be able to say, hey, we can set up this meeting. Can you make this time work? Yeah. Or this person personally, can you just call Maxine Dexter or whatever?
Courtney, I think that is entirely the point of us, voting on and adopting a legislative agenda so that you have that set of established criteria that you can act upon. And there really aren't likely to be very many situations that haven't been contemplated in our legislative agenda that we've already adopted. Sometimes maybe something might come up, and in that case, we can scramble and sort of seek guidance from the board and leadership. But otherwise, I think you can assume that you can run on things that are directly connected to what we've adopted as our agenda.
Thank you for putting that on the record.
Chair Constam, if I may, I think I just want to know, I appreciate the litmus test of the board goals, or the board goals as a litmus test. I also want to make sure that we give ourselves a little bit of a wiggle room for operational or other kind of legislative priorities that may come about. I mean, again, not saying that those should be our primary focus, and
For
that
sure.
I think that's your point, that our focus should be these goals. But I just want to make sure that we're keeping open the other opportunities.
And
For sure.
I think
But
we can
again,
find
I feel
ways.
like
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think it's pretty rare that things come up that aren't, somehow under the umbrella of what we have contemplated in our agenda or connected in some way to our goals. What, Courtney?
That's exactly what I was going to say. There's always an angle to get to these items. Go ahead, Lisa.
So our legislative agenda, like we just discussed, is centered on the board goals to eliminate unacceptable gaps in 3rd grade reading, 5th grade math, high school graduation, and 8th grade readiness by investing in the education system through stable and equitable funding, addressing unfinished learning, and increasing enrichment opportunities.
So can I say those aren't actually our board goals?
No, we know.
Oh, these are the categories we've developed that we'll list out.
Okay, no,
Yes.
the 3rd grade reading, 5th grade math, high school graduation, 8th grade readiness are not our board goals.
Those
3rd grade
are
reading, 5th grade math, like post-secondary readiness, you can say high school graduation, but it's instead of 8th grade readiness, it's actually high school readiness. So
Oh,
it's at
okay.
the end of
Okay.
8th grade, we're looking to see if they're ready for high school.
right.
So it's
We-
not
we
8th
may have
grade
just-
readiness.
We'll
it's high school.
we'll make sure
So,
that those
yeah.
are correct. Sorry. Thank you.
Yes. And then meeting child and student social, emotional, behavioral, and mental health needs, supporting a strong education workforce, improving school operations and buildings, and cultivating safe classrooms and communities. So I'll just go into.
And I
each
think
of
you have the
these.
goals right on the slide
Yeah, I think
before
we
this,
just-
and
yeah,
this
we just
slide
did
is
probably
not.
Connect. I'm
yes.
sorry.
Yes.
That's okay, just wanna, it helps.
Yes,
Yeah,
it is.
across
It's really
all the
helpful.
things, Yeah.
We want to get it right, obviously. We can say it, we can't always write.
And we do say 8th grade readiness from time to time because it is 8th grade and it's about readiness.
Yeah.
Just readiness for high school, yeah.
Ailey, we're not going to get into modifiers here.
Sorry.
And based on that legislative draft agenda, we did go to the district student council, and they provided the following feedback to show sort of which areas they supported and areas that they wanted to see included on the agenda. So they did support making sure that we're maintaining state funding and local funding in CTE and arts programs. They support us strengthening and more alignment with the SUN system with our PPS priorities. They would like to see having one mental health professional in every school. They support addressing gun violence in our communities. And there's support for strengthening infrastructure to make our schools more climate resilient. And outside of those things they have interest in removing barriers for parents to be educators and work in schools. They
Specifically, people that maybe don't have credentials could get somehow, these non-traditional pathways conversations that we're having with TSPC.
And then interest in teacher trainings that can allow school staff to respond to hate speech and microaggressions. There's interest in advocating for funding to make sure all schools are ADA compliant. They have interest in demonstrating that PPS's climate policy makes us a climate leader, sort of elevating our role in the climate justice space. Interest in addressing the instrument shortage in our schools.
Band instruments?
Yes.
Okay.
And they're interested in increasing culturally specific summer learning opportunities.
It was a really good conversation. They had a lot to say, a
That's awesome.
lot of interest. Obviously, they haven't read everything that we,
Right.
like, they don't know that our bond includes first ADA compliance, those kinds of things. But we tried to share that, and it was a short amount of time, so, you know,
But we
there's a
always-
lot to.
hey, we'll take more money from the state
Yeah,
to do that,
Totally,
right?
totally.
No, this is great. And I'm really glad you guys took the time to have a deep conversation with DSC. And Barney and I have talked, and I haven't had a chance to catch up with her to just kind of get a little more depth from her perspective about this. But this all looks really great.
Yeah, they're really awesome. It was fun.
Yeah, and we'll plan to return with the group and talk about strategy, and they're happy to be sort of help with our presence in Salem
I would say they were
a lot.
eager.
Very excited to provide testimony and share their stories.
I think students sitting in legislators' offices is
Yeah.
going to be the most effective lobbying we can
That's
do.
what we told them.
No question about that.
I want those kids from MLC to come, right, to the legislators' office that were there last night at giving testimony at the board.
And we also told them, you know, the way this session, it's a little unclear what it's going to look like because there's construction happening, and who knows with variants, knock on wood, we're all over it. But so we told them, hey, even if you can't be there, we can make a meeting happen. And
Yeah.
that's the beauty of some of this, the silver lining. You can meet with your legislators probably more easily now.
Yeah,
So,
because of virtual meetings.
if it's virtual, yeah.
Well, with that, we did want to jump into a discussion and to hear from you if there's any questions, ideas, or reflections that you'd like to share. I know that we did just present this document in the last week, so you know we'll definitely want to keep working with you to get more input as you have time to review it and process that. So.
Haley, I've had a chance to, work with these guys and sort of work with our team in the creation of this, but I'm interested in your feedback.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the number one, well, the two things I think are most important is advocating for QEM. I mean, I know there's problems with QEM, but that seems like a pretty, the state has said this is what we need for quality education.
The
Could we
state
please fund it?
created commissions.
Yeah,
said.
yeah,
The
you're
legislature created
you
commissions.
say this is the amount of money we need.
Yeah.
Could you please give it to us? And then I think the other thing that's really important with the budget is that our costs go up about 4% a year. If we were just going to have everything the same, it's a 4% increase. And I don't. When I've talked to Rob Noss and Maxine Dexter and others, it doesn't feel like they understand that they're like, well, we're giving you more money. I'm like, yes, but you're not giving us 4% more.
Yeah.
And so you're actually funding us less than last year. And that seems to be like I don't know why.
And it goes back to that CSL conversation.
Right.
It has been a thorn in our side for many years, and it's a big issue and a really
Yes.
unfortunate discrepancy
Yeah.
that somehow isn't getting broken through. Like nobody's breaking through.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see that when we see the state school fund number come out at some point soon.
Well,
This one is huge to me, and this is a conversation that's taking place on many, many different levels. It's one that is constantly discussed by our partners. So with COSA, with OSBA, with our fellow Multnomah County districts through MESD. Jonathan, I know you're in these conversations, and there's definitely strength in numbers, and there's political power in numbers. So I know that these conversations continue to occur, but Courtney, I agree. It's kind of mystifying the degree to which it hasn't really landed with legislators, including legislators who consider themselves real champions for K-12 public education. So we just need to, Jonathan, I would say we need to be really well armed with the facts from the finance side of our house about how we describe current service level and what our real costs are so that it's irrefutable.
Yeah.
And it's really important, like infographics. I mean, everything we can have to make it really clear, because these legislatures, you can hear it in the gubernatorial race right now. They love to say well, we passed a corporate activities tax and we're sending so much more to our public schools. And And rarely recognition of the increase in costs. And also coming out of COVID, I mean, we have a good story to tell relative to costs in terms of all of our labor agreements that we just resolved. And we hear from Democratic legislators that they don't understand very well, what we're trying to say about current service level. And it's like, well, we just renegotiated all of our contracts and look where we are in terms of our labor cost, our single biggest cost. So to me, this is all hands on deck. We need to keep pushing this conversation at every level and through every channel that we can. And it would be good to share information about what's going on in those other, conversations and places.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Chair, and I just will to know an agreement and hear your requests as we think about how we're going to communicate and what is the collateral. I will note and really excited about the partnership and relationship we have with ERS that is helping us look through our financial outlook, if you will, and what you'll learn in a few weeks as we're preparing for our presentation. I'll give you a sneak preview here and to show you the types of things that I think we as PPS can talk about. So together, just again, a little insight here, but together PPS is differentiating staffing ratios and equity formula directly directs approximately 40% more staff to higher needs schools and students. That is, again, that's just it's the type of information that we are currently gathering in our analysis that we'll share in a few weeks with you. And it is that type of information that I think will be critical for Courtney and Lisa as our chief lobbyists in Salem to use. So I just want to note that.
I hadn't heard that characterized that way. You can see it when you look at the per student funding by school, but I hadn't heard that statistic like that, Jonathan. That's pretty compelling.
Amy, you talked a little bit about our labor partners and those agreements that we've just finished. I think one thing which may not come up in this legislative session, but it's kind of on my radar, is about our, and I don't know how this all dovetails, but the state mediation office. And I know that we've had some employment issues go to mediation, and I think if those were public, people would be shocked. So how do we have conversations about? I don't even know if that's legislative, but I
don't know of any lever of influence that we potentially have there,
other than our contract changing. But so I won't say anything more about that.
It's interesting.
I definitely do think that I have a high school senior, and I think gun violence is something that keeps her up at night. And I think that is a huge high priority for our students. And I think anything that we can do to reduce access to guns, to increase training, to help support mental health. The incident that just happened in St. Louis, the narrative is that he felt isolated and a loner. And so how do we help again with
that
staff,
sense of belonging and
all of that stuff, our successful schools are. So anything that can help us
and I think
with that piece of how do we care for our young people, right?
And I think it's apropos that Danny's still here, because I think a lot of this is also our violence prevention work and connecting with the city and county on that work. It's at a high level, this ballot measure, which you guys hadn't had a chance and probably won't have a chance to take a position on. I know where you would stand on it. It's polling very well, so that will be interesting to see what happens there, because that's definitely going to be helpful. I think it's also examining ways that we can look at even just our, I was just having this conversation with Commissioner Hardesty's office around lighting at schools. Like lighting is a huge built environment issue that we can look at as a way to, when it's dark and the lights are way up here, can we bring them down? Things like that are just, they seem small. Sometimes those things can't be changed quickly, but they were really open to, like, at Jefferson, can we bring those down? So I think all these, it's not just one solution. It's a lot of things pulled together, and talked about in the same space. And so I appreciate you bringing that up because I think there's a lot that can happen at the state level, but there's a lot more I think that can
We can
happen
do at the
locally.
city.
Yeah.
But I think the, philosophy of elevating our board goals as like, how does everything fit into that? And then I think.
But I think to, both of your points,
Yeah.
everything can be connected back to that. Because if our kids aren't feeling safe, if they're not getting fed, if they're, there's
They
a
don't
laundry
survive
list,
till graduation.
then
Right?
then there's a reason that they might be behind in math or reading or whatever. So, we can make a connection to all of it. Yeah. And then I think we added just election considerations here. Obviously, we have an election coming up in a little over a month, and or a little over a month. Oh my God. I wish it were more time, but in a couple weeks. So we'll know more about, who is our governor, what are their priorities, what does the legislative landscape look like? We have a lot of new legislators coming, which is also a great opportunity for us to introduce ourselves as a district and as board members with all of our new elected officials. We also have like a really great set of returning legislators that represent Portland, and they're great, wonderful people that generally support us, which we're lucky to have. And but we can deepen those relationships, and it's one of our goals is to deepen and maintain those relationships and make sure that, to your point again, they fully understand that we aren't funded, we're funded by program, not by, like, if our enrollment drops, there's a lot of folks out there that think, well, your enrollment is dropping, you don't need as much money, and that's not how this works.
No.
And so continuing to educate them about how school funding works, about how school districts spend money. I love that stat that Jonathan threw out, because I think that's the kind of thing that matters to people. They want to hear the specifics about how we're spending our money at the places that need it the most. So those are like little nuggets that are really helpful for us, but us being Lisa and I, but also us as a district to share and continue to share with our elected officials.
This is good. I'd like to move us along because we still have 2 more items. So I will make sure that Ailey, all of our other board colleagues, take a look at the materials that have been posted today and pass along any feedback. And we actually don't have another meeting of this committee scheduled before we'll be taking it to the board, right, Courtney?
Correct.
So unless there's something that is dramatically shifts between now and the beginning of December, either in terms of,
Actually,
emerging.
maybe not to cut you off, sorry, Chair. We do have a November 16th IGC meeting. So
we do. I'm sorry.
We could talk about it offline, but I had forgotten that it was the week before Thanksgiving, not canceled.
Okay.
So we could.
Okay. So then we'll have an opportunity to discuss any fine tune and integrate any feedback that we get before then. So thank you very much.
Do you want me to roll right into the right to return update?
I do.
Cool. Okay. And I see Director Hollins is here as a participant, and I know he's been interested in this, so I'll just kind of go quickly, and Kate's here in case I miss anything. But in September, late September, middle of September, we went to the MESD superintendent's meeting and just shared with them our interest in more formalizing our right to return interdistrict transfer process. We, historically, we've been doing this it's kind of been a handshake agreement, or at least not very formal, with other districts around the area, to allow for students who have been pushed into other districts because of displacement, housing crisis, et cetera, to allow those students to come back in to PPS schools as long as there's room in those schools, and come back and attend. And one particular example that Judy shared was a mom who had gone to Vernon, and their family had moved out to David Douglas School District. They got a house through the PCRI program, and she really wanted her daughter to go to Vernon. So she was able to through this process. And it was just a really nice anecdote and story to share, how important it is for families and communities to have that history and shared legacy in some of these schools. So I just share that on the side, but more formally, we're working with other districts to get their feedback on a proposed MOU. They have until November 1st to give us feedback. so that we can tweak any language. And then our hope is to bring a resolution to the board by the end of the year, maybe in January, actually. I think we talked about January. To just kind of have you all have that opportunity to more formally approve this process. And I think I've said double down a lot today, but double down on the commitment to allowing for our families to come back. And then the other piece that is important to note, we've also talked to the Portland Housing Bureau about how they work their process for their, Danny, remind me the name of the program.
It's the North and Northeast.
North and Northeast,
Housing strategy or something.
yeah, something like that. To look it up. So we're modeling that, what that looks like. How do people prove that they used to live here? We're modeling our process on their process so that we have something to kind of anchor it to. So that they've been helpful in sharing their experience and background of their program with us. And I think that's mostly it. Judy would have liked to be here. She's on vacation. So if there are other questions that come up, we'll make sure to get back to you. But it's I think a good thing. That doesn't seem like a lot of pushback. The one thing that came up in the superintendent's meeting was just around enrollment, right? Because when you move if you move a kid back into PPS, then of course that district loses that funding. But we're also, it's not a huge amount of kids. So we think that that's, that most of the districts have been okay.
Courtney, the only thing that I would be looking for in the language is, right now we have a lot of families who come back to our schools without any formal type of enrollment release. There's just a recognition that they were gentrified out of their historic neighborhoods. They show an interest in returning to these schools, and they are allowed to do so. So the one thing I would be looking for is that by codifying things and by actually adopting these policies, we're not going to create language that in any way makes it more difficult than the informal process that we have now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we agree. And I don't think, Kate, yeah.
Yeah, and we've talked about that extensively with Judy, and she's talked to some of her colleagues in other districts. We're allowing people to self-certify. So if someone comes to us and says, I used to live in this neighborhood, essentially we're going to take them at their word, which is the same process we use now. We're also going to offer, if someone has gone through the City of Portland program and qualified through that program, that they could automatically tell us and share that knowledge, and then that would automatically put them in. So we're certainly aware of not making it harder. And again, the idea is to replace, because now you also have to get your release document signed by the other district. And that occasionally is where the holdup is, not, maliciously, but, where the timing, right, or the timing isn't, is off, or families have difficulty navigating, with two different districts, what they're supposed to do and all those things. So we've been very conscious, and Judy has been excellent in sort of figuring out how we're going to make this as easy as possible for the families. So that is all over the process that we've come up with, and I think you'd see that in the documents.
Okay, Ailey, do you have any questions here?
I don't. No, I think this is really great.
And I was going to just raise one other connection point. We've also looped in Camille because this obviously will impact or is connected to the various work streams around Jefferson modernization, Tubman relocation, and the Center for Black Student Excellence. So we are trying to thread that needle and make sure all the appropriate people understand what's happening so that we can also communicate this out to families, because while we don't think there's a large number that will take advantage of this, we think there's probably some that don't know that it's an opportunity. So we want to make sure that folks know that this is a possibility for them.
This is a huge issue in our Jefferson master planning process right now, because the question is, who are we building this school for? People talk about Oregon's largest historically Black high school. Well, it's not anymore, and it's getting less and less so every year. So what are our levers? This is one lever. What are our other levers to see through partnerships, what we can do if we really want to try to rectify, repair, rebuild that legacy in that neighborhood. Jonathan, you want to move us on to this next item around the Cully TIF?
Yeah, happy to. Maybe if you can provide direction in terms of what you'd like to cover. I can provide just a public, more general overview, similar to what I did in an email, if that's helpful.
So since we're just our we committee of two, Ailey, you've seen that email. Director Hollins, you're on here too. And you obviously are well familiar with this issue. So Jonathan, if you could just highlight what are the impacts to PPS from this proposal and what are the potential benefits for our students?
Sure. Thank you. So maybe just for the public, the folks that are maybe viewing here, the COLI TIF is TIF stands for the tax increment financing. It's a proposal.
Jonathan, also, we don't have any posted materials about this.
Correct.
Yeah. So, okay.
Correct. So the city of Portland is considering developing a tax increment financing district in the COLI neighborhood. A TIF is a state authorized redevelopment and finance program that helps communities improve and redevelops physically deteriorating areas suffering from economic stagnation, unsafe or poorly planned environments. So there's active conversations at the city level to establish these. These are very normal in the city of Portland. There are many across the city.
Also known as urban renewal districts, just because a lot of people are familiar with that term.
Correct. And so just providing that in terms of context. So again, the city council is considering it and is scheduled to vote on it here in the next month, in the month of November. In terms of the impact to Portland Public Schools, again, our properties are included in many TIF districts across the city of Portland. As a taxing authority, the plan as proposed would divert property tax dollars from our schools to in the neighborhood to support the COLI TIF. And so particularly, as I mentioned, Prosper Portland, who manages these TIFs, currently manages 11 TIFs. Some of these TIFs will expire, and so those tax dollars will return back to PPS. So if you think about the TIF, there are multiple TIFs. The dollars that get impacted are the dollars coming from the state school fund. So what gets frozen and diverted to the TIF is the state school fund. It does not impact the local option levy nor the school bonds. And so in terms of so that's the impact on us as a taxing authority.
Wait, Jonathan, just because I'm not clear, because that was kind of a different way of, excuse me, 1 second. You go ahead.
Well, and I think to clarify, I think when I say divert, resources, these are diverting resources to improve and revitalize community through a number of means: commercial, retail, residential, streets, mass transit, parks. So I want to be very clear that this is ultimately about making sure that the community is thriving and we have thriving communities across the city of Portland. And so as land stewards, PPS is steward to 3 properties within the proposed boundary: Rigler, Sacagawea Early Education Center, and the Whitaker Adams site. Inclusion in a TIF district allows PPS, so this is one of the benefits, and other property owners to request access to tax increments resources for capital development that aligns with the goals of the TIF district plan and subsequent 5-year action plans. And I want to be clear, although TIF dollars can't be used for educational purposes, previous creative partnerships have focused on portions of educational facilities that are widely accessible. So as an example, the Jefferson High School frontage is one. Again, and you will notice that Whitaker Adams site is labeled as a blight designation in the report. Blight designation is a state definition that means an underdeveloped, underutilized site. It does not mean that there are, and we were assured by the executive director of Prosper Portland that neither Prosper Portland nor the Portland Housing Bureau has any plans for the site. As you all know, we have a long-range facilities plan with projected plans there. So I'll stop there, Chair. I don't know if that's a comprehensive review. I think I appreciate again the opportunity to provide this in the public sphere.
So just a quick overview of the timeline for this adoption process for the TIF.
Yeah, great question. Courtney, I believe so right now it is in review in the community. So it's open for community engagement, community voice. So we've provided feedback as a school district. My understanding is the city council is scheduled to vote on it in the second or third week of November.
November
The
9th.
9th, right?
November 9th. Thank you very much. So November 9th.
Colin.
And I think that's the major milestone
Peanut
to
gallery.
make the. So we will continue to monitor this and obviously any other TIFs. As I mentioned, TIFs, come online, come offline, and I think it'll be good to have an update of where these are and when they expire. So the board has an understanding of the moving target.
That would be good. And when you said that they just go to the state school fund, so since we have our equalization in place statewide, does that mean that the impact of reduced revenue from our area gets significantly diluted across the state? So it's really going to be relatively small.
It's a shared sacrifice.
Correct. Thank you again.
Amy, you're muted.
Sorry. Courtney, you had one last thing you wanted to close us with.
Yeah, I have two things. One is we put it on the agenda just to have an opportunity to mention, and I know Roseanne sent out an email, but on December 15th, we're going to be organizing a board legislative dinner with likely one or two board members is the idea, or I'm sorry, any board members invited to that. Prior to that, we're going to do an organizational meeting where one or two members could come on behalf of the district to share priorities, things like that. So just know that it's probably already on your calendar, but December 15th is the dinner, details to follow, and we'll be working with Andrew to determine who should go to the planning meeting.
So the point is to have a sort of unified agenda to take to Salem from the metropolitan area.
Yep.
All right.
And my last thing, because I totally forgot while we were talking about the legislative agenda and we're moving through things fast because there's only so many hours in the day. Danny has been talking with Lisa and I about a fix that we might be pursuing in Salem and related to bias incidents. And I just want to kick the floor over to her, and I'm sorry that I didn't do this earlier.
No, that's okay.
I know we talked about talking about it. So go for it.
Yeah, so really quickly, one of the things that our team does is that we track all of the bias incidents that happen at the district, and so there have been an uptick since the Trump administration in these sort of like different sort of things. This year we had 3 incidents in Southwest Portland in just less than 2 weeks. So one of the things that we've encountered is that when we have an anonymous act of hate is that in terms of law enforcement, they've sort of said that their ability to sort of like investigate this as anything beyond kind of like a vandalism, an act of vandalism, is that the legislation requires there to be like a sort of detailed victim. So we've had, unfortunately, we've had incidents where there has been a noose outside of a school where there has been a Black principal. And it's very clear that there was an intended victim. It was very clear that's a horrible act of hate speech. But the police have said that they were unable to investigate that as as a hate speech because the victim wasn't sort of like made clear. So what we have done with the help of
his name wasn't on the news, is that?
yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I think that's the issue. So what we've done is that we've worked with the Office of Equity and Human Rights, with Commissioner Rubio's office over at the city, to try to think about like how could the district work with the city to sort of think about like ways to change this legislation. So there's language. So we have a draft concept out there that we're working. Kate and Mary were really helpful in reviewing that language and giving us some suggestions. And then I think under some advice from legislator, we're gonna also try to think about like from the sort of like DA and sort of Department of Justice side of, you know, what are some suggestions. So we do want to try to be as collaborative as possible, but also something has to change. I think we've got a lot of interest, particularly from one school community, where parents are sort of like, what do we need to do to change this? The remedies on the justice side are not acceptable to our community. So we're trying to work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. And sorry, Ayla, did I interrupt you?
No, I was just saying thank you, Danny, for doing that work. Same thing you were.
Yeah, thank you, and keep us posted. And also, this is a great issue for students to be engaged on because our students have been harmed and are harmed by these incidents.
I still can't get over can't investigate it because wouldn't investigating it reveal who the intended victim was? I'm struggling. Okay.
Well, and until you investigate, how do you know that it's not an individual, right?
Right. That's a good point. Okay. Anyway.
Okay, everybody, thank you so much for your time and your work, and we'll see you in November.
See ya. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
All right. It's exactly 2:30. Look at that.
Wow.
So that's amazing, Amy.